Now, Pavarotti was a good friend.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. Now, as a disclaimer, this channel is for entertainment purposes. These are my opinions, and I'm not here to slander anyone. Let's get started. Okay, folks, this is part 5 of my series. And I know it's taken me a little while to get this particular episode out. So I would recommend, and I've put all of the other 4 parts to this series in the link. If you haven't seen 1, 2, 3, and 4, please watch those before you watch this one, or else it's gonna just create more questions than answers for you. And if you haven't watched those other ones in a while, I recommend watching them again before you watch this one, so that everything is fluent. And they're fluid. Everything's fluid. No, everything's fluid. So I believe what I'll do when I complete this one is I will take all 5 parts and streamline them together and make one video just so I have it out there, because the reason I wanted to do this is a couple of reasons. One is I get asked all the time, what do you really think happened, Pavarotti? And I think it's important for me to explain what I truly believe happened as it relates to BRYAN KOHBERGER's part in this. I mean, from start to finish, this is what I truly believe happened to BRYAN KOHBERGER. This is how I believe an innocent man ends up going to trial for this atrocity. And, if some very good defense is not presented, he would be found guilty for this atrocity simply because of the circumstances involved around it. But I want to make it clear, I do not believe BRYAN KOHBERGER committed this atrocity, but I do believe that he's a very unlucky individual, and he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, doing, you may say, the wrong things, even though they had nothing to do with this case. But I believe they had everything to do with why he's sitting in a jail cell today. And I want to finish up this series explaining why I feel this is the way that it happened. That was one thing. The other reason I wanted to do this, because I believe I'm right on this, folks. From everything that I've looked at in this case, I'm trying to give you the reasons why I feel this way. There's no way I could give you every reason why I feel this way, but I'm trying to give you all the reasons why I feel this way to show you, because some people get the idea that maybe this thing won't go to trial. They don't have anything against BRYAN KOHBERGER, and I'm here to tell you, they have circumstantial evidence against him. And they're going to try to paint a picture with that circumstantial evidence, even though it's the wrong picture to be painted. And I'm going to try to explain in this one why they're even trying to paint that picture. So with all of that being said, let's just get right into it. Okay, so I'm going to start again on November 13, 2022, and that was the atrocity. If you watch my other videos, it is my belief that KOHBERGER and KOPACA had just met with the DoorDash driver, picked up their narcotics for the evening, and they were sitting there until they heard screams and seen people running out of that house, and then they hit the gas and they got out of that neighborhood. It is my speculation that after KOHBERGER and KOPACA probably had a long discussion about what it is they heard and saw and what they should do about it, they came to the conclusion that maybe it was nothing. And he took KOPACA home and he went back to his apartment because he had plans to do some driving that weekend. And around 9 o'clock, I think his curiosity became too much for him, and he hopped in his car. And just like the probable cause affidavit says, he drove over to the King Road residence to see if what he heard and saw was real or not. And when he got there, he seen a quiet house, a quiet street, and no ambulances, no police. And he thought, okay, well, we must have just overreacted and it was nothing. So he immediately drives back to his apartment. He feels confident that nothing happened. He continues on about his weekend. And then around 1 o'clock, as he's out driving on his planned trip, the alerts go out. And I believe it's around 1 o'clock. It may have been a little bit after that or a little bit before, okay? So, but I believe it was around 1 o'clock. And if you look at the PCA, and I meant to go through this with you, but I'm just putting it out there now. It almost appears that based on the movements of him, based on his cache data in the PCA, that at this point in time when the alerts go out, you can see a sporadic movement in his vehicle. And I believe that's him coming to the conclusion that what he had seen was real, and he doesn't know what to do about it at this point. Because, folks, there's no way he can come forward to law enforcement and tell them that he was there because of why he was there. So he's in a pickle at this point. He knows that he should come forward, but he'll lose everything if he does. So he chooses, him and KOHBERGER both choose just to stay quiet. They didn't do the atrocity, so perhaps if they stay quiet, nobody will ever bring them into it. But then some things happen. We know that, as I just stated, BK and BK agree to sever their ties with each other and to stay quiet. The DoorDash stops delivering based on the video that we seen with JLR. So it's my perspective that the DoorDash probably got out of town. And we know who I'm talking about when I say the DoorDash. And because even though they may not have had anything to do with the atrocity, they know that they were there that night and they were doing something illegal as well. Now, TF, we know where he goes. He heads to Spokane. It's my contention he heads to Spokane with the rest of the assailants. So nothing happens after that, except for BK and BK. They both agreed. We're not going to go back to Moscow. We're just going to lay low and let this thing blow over. So that's why there's no trips from BK's phone back to Moscow, Idaho after the atrocity. Now, TF gets returned to Latah County on December 2nd. We know what happens after that. But then on December 7th, the alert goes out for the Elantras. And remember, when the alert goes out, it's not for suspects. It's for people who may have seen something that happened. I'm not even 100% sure at this time that TF has said that they are responsible for the atrocity. He may have simply said they were sitting there and he knew one of them was KOHBERGER. So from that point, though, you can bet that both of the BKs know that their car was seen in the area and they're probably getting pretty nervous at this point. So that's why I can imagine they probably, with KOHBERGER knowing how to, knowing a lot about cloud forensics, he probably assisted KOHBERGER in both of them wiping their phones for most of the information that was on there. Then on December 15th, we know that KOHBERGER is killed by law enforcement. Then in the video of the drug interdictors pulling over him and his dad on the way to Pennsylvania, we know the first thing that they ask about is the shooting of KOHBERGER. That was right on the tip of their mind, and you can bet BK is really freaking out at this point, knowing that KOHBERGER was unalived by law enforcement. He doesn't know what's going on, but you can bet he knows it's getting serious. Then between the 15th and the 19th, it's my contention that is when they actually located the DoorDash driver, and the DoorDash driver told them about BRYAN KOHBERGER. But at this point, I do not believe that law enforcement truly believe that either KOHBERGER or KOHBERGER are the real assailants. But you can bet, and this is purely my speculation, but this is what I truly believe. I believe somewhere on December 19th, possibly the 18th, that the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, Scott Green of the university, and all of the law enforcement involved in the investigation, or perhaps just the main investigators involved in the investigation, I believe they all got together and they discussed where they were at in the investigation and where they needed to proceed with it based on the information that they then had in their hand. And here is what I believe that they decided. I believe point number one, they have no other leads at this point, and they have mounting pressure not only from the community, but at this point it had reached worldwide perspectives. I mean, so much pressure you can't possibly imagine. They have a car that is in the area. They know from sporadic video. They think they have one car. It turns out they have two. They have two witnesses putting the car near the house at the time of the atrocity. They've already killed one of the people that was in that car. The true motive to the crime, by going the route that they're going, can actually be hidden. And why would they want that hidden? Because the true motive to the crime, and law enforcement knows what the motive to this crime was, would absolutely annihilate the enrollment in that university. One of the students unaliving them would not hurt enrollment any more than the students that were unalived. One of the frat boys wouldn't hurt enrollment in that university any more than it was already hurt either. But students being unalived because of DRUGS regarding either them or their family members, this would make this entire college and area a very dangerous place for young people to be, and they know that. And it would absolutely impact the college. Now, here's the problems that they had, though. They know they have no real evidence that either of the BKs actually committed the crime. Also, the reliability of their two witnesses is highly questionable, because you can bet there's no telling what they believe TF was doing in the area. You know what I believe he was doing in the area, but I'm sure they believe he was doing something totally different, and it revolved drugs. But they know that the DoorDash driver, they know what that delivery was all about. That's why there's no other information about it in the PCA, folks. But the other problem that they have is they have zero connection to the victims and no motive whatsoever. So their solution to this problem, they've got touch DNA on a knife sheath that they have an incomplete profile from. They reverse engineer an investigation, fudge the DNA on the knife sheath, and then to cover up the reliability of their witnesses, they leak to the press about the IGG investigation finding the assailants in the case. Then on December 20th, Payne admits on the stand the investigation into BK actually starts. That's the day that he had the first conversation with the WSU officer that located the Elantra way back on November 29th. Everything in the PCA starts at that point. Then on December the 27th, they get BK's father's DNA from the trash in Pennsylvania. They fly it, instead of the FBI taking it to their local lab and creating a profile, they fly it all the way back to the Idaho State Police lab, and then in a miraculous period of time, they match the DNA from the trash and exclude it from anybody other than the perpetrator's father. Then on December 30th, BK is arrested, and of course he asks, am I the only one being arrested? At this point, he was hoping the other true assailants had been arrested so that it would be a lot easier for him to explain and exonerate himself, just like he said he was excited to do. When he found out nobody else had been arrested and he's the only suspect in the crime, then you can bet lawyering up was the first thing that he did versus answering any questions, because he knew he was in trouble since the time of the atrocity because he couldn't come forward and explain what he was really doing in the area, folks. And by this time, law enforcement knows what BK was really doing in the area, and that's why they're willing to take a leap and try to prosecute him based on he could have done it rather than he probably did it, because they know that he was involved in a drug transaction during the time of this atrocity, and that makes him less than a human in their eyes, I assure you. But then on January 5th, they took the buccal swab and they matched it to BK. Now, how do you come up with all this stuff, Pavarotti, and really believe it? There's so many different factors, but one of the factors is when you start diving into this process that they used with the trash and the original DNA and then matching it to the buccal swab, you'll see that there's so many holes in it that even law enforcement knew that what they were doing was not going to hold up in court. Okay, those last few dates that I just mentioned are very important, so I want you to keep those in mind. On December 27th, they got the trash from BK's house in Pennsylvania, flew it back to the Idaho State Police lab, and then miraculously created a DNA profile from the trash of Bryan Kohberger's father, and then tried to match it to a DNA sample that excluded anybody else from being the son of this man. Now that would be strong evidence. I think you would agree. If they could take the DNA of Bryan Kohberger's father and exclude everybody else except for his sons to be the man who left the DNA on the knife sheath, and considering he doesn't have any other sons, only Bryan Kohberger, that would be very, very strong evidence. You would think that law enforcement would really want to use that, wouldn't you? Keep that in mind as we look at this. Okay, I'm going to try to do this in order so it makes the most sense. But you see here on December 27, 2022, Pennsylvania agents recovered the trash from the Kohberger family residence located in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. That evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing on December 28th. The Idaho State Lab reported that the DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of the suspect profile. As not being excluded as the biological father, okay? So maybe that isn't so non-specific right there, huh? But if that happened on the 27th, and then they got the profile and they matched it on the 28th, then why are they so nervous about this on the 29th? You see, this is Blaker's application for the search warrant for Kohberger's residence in Washington State. And you see it was dated December 29th, 2022, the exact same time that they were going to implement the search warrant in Pennsylvania on Kohberger's family's residence. But when we look at their search warrant, it says, upon the sworn complaint made before me, there's probable cause to believe that the crimes of murder in the first degree and burglary per Idaho code has been committed in Idaho, and that evidence of those crimes are contraband, the fruits of the crime, or things otherwise criminally possessed, or weapons or other things by means of which a crime has been committed or reasonably appears about to be committed is concealed in or on certain premises. In making this determination, this court did not consider the information in the supplemental disclosure, RE DNA test, as evidence supporting the existence of probable cause. This court also does not consider the information in that supplemental disclosure to be exculpatory. Now, why would they not use that DNA match that could not exclude his father as one of the reasons to obtain this search warrant. In fact, they go so far as to make sure that they put the language in the search warrant that they are not using the disclosure of the DNA test as evidence, because they know that if the DNA evidence is suppressed at a later date for whatever reason, then this search warrant would be negated if they used the DNA evidence as reason for probable cause. So what is it that they were so afraid of about the supplemental disclosure of the DNA test as evidence that they wanted to exclude it in their probable cause? And then it says this court also does not consider the information in that supplemental disclosure to be exculpatory. Well, what kind of statement is that? The court doesn't consider the information exculpatory? Then we got to ask ourselves, why would the court even put that line in there? What is it about this DNA disclosure that they needed to explain they don't consider it to be exculpatory? Is there something in this DNA disclosure that somebody else may look at and consider exculpatory? See, this is the problem with all of the DNA evidence in the BRYAN KOHBERGER case, folks. Then when we get to their main evidence that they're going to try to use in court, because when they get to court, all they're going to try to use is the STR profile match. And you can see on December 30th, KOHBERGER was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder in the first degree and 1 count of burglary. A search warrant for KOHBERGER's DNA was issued on January 5th, 2023. A traditional STR DNA comparison was done between the STR profile found on the K-bar knife sheath and defendant's DNA. The comparison showed a statistical match. Specifically, the STR profile is at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to be seen if defendant is the source than if an unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population is the source. So no mention of an IgG or the match that they did between KOHBERGER's father and whatever they matched it to. Now they're talking straight STR to STR. This is the only DNA evidence that the prosecution is going to try to get into trial. But if you take all of the other aspects of the DNA in this case, then you can see that once they got his buccal swab and created an STR profile, matching it to the original STR profile, if it was exactly the way it was when they first compiled it, it wouldn't have shown a match probably at all. Maybe some kind of a match, but certainly not one to the 5.37 octillion times degree that they're trying to state it is now. And I have a whole nother video I'm going to do to explain this bogus STR that they've put together. And I believe Yoli did a video today showing the different times in the Idaho State Police lab between November and December where they changed equipment. And that is suspect in itself. Y'all should watch that video she put out. It was very telling. But the IgG, anything related to that is never going to be brought up in trial. Prosecution's already said that, and that makes no sense whatsoever if everything was on the level, and you know this. So that is what I honestly believe we're dealing with as it relates to BRYAN KOHBERGER's participation in this matter and what they're going to be trying to use against him in a court of law to prosecute him. They're not going to be trying to use any real evidence, only the circumstantial evidence that we talked about in this video. And that circumstantial evidence doesn't prove that he unalived anybody. In fact, I think the circumstantial evidence will prove that he did not do it. But just so you know why he is on trial, and it will go to trial, and what they are trying to do to him, This is my opinion in detail of what really happened as it relates to BRYAN KOHBERGER. Now, what really happened in the atrocity is a total, that's a whole nother ball game. And I put in here in the series what I believe truly happened as far as the atrocity goes as well. And I will continue to work to try to prove that. I think what you're going to find at trial, if you follow me on this series, you'll be able to follow the trial really well, because you'll know what they're trying to do and what I believe truly happened, and you'll be able to distinguish the BS from the real poop. But please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. Till next time, Pavarotti's out.